The afternoon sky darkened as rain clouds gathered over the small neighborhood of Pine Heights. Andre Jackson wiped down the counter of Mabel's cafe for the third time that hour, his eyes occasionally drifting to the window where raindrops had begun their steady descent. At 16, he was lankier than most boys his age, with deep brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His worn blue uniform shirt had been ironed with care that morning, a small detail his mother, Lisa, insisted upon despite their tight circumstances. "Order. Up for table 4, called Mr. Chen from the kitchen window, sliding a plate of steaming apple pie across the counter. Andre nodded, grateful for the Saturday shift. Every dollar he earned went straight into the glass jar at home, helping his mother make ends meet for him and his 2 younger sisters. Since his father's passing 3 years ago, Andre had become the man of the house in more ways than one. The bell above the cafe door jingled, and a gust of wind blew in along with a soaking wet girl about Andre's age. She stood just inside the entrance, water dripping from her light jacket onto the welcome mat. Her curly hair clung to her face, which wore an expression of complete distress. "Is everything okay?" Andre asked, setting down the apple pie on table 4 before approaching her with a clean towel. The girl looked up, her hazel eyes wide with panic. "I can't find my wallet. I had it when I got off the bus and now it's gone. Everything's in there, my ID, my money for the month." Her voice caught. "Here," Andre said, offering her the towel. "Why don't you sit down first? You're soaked through." She hesitated, glancing at the menu board above the counter. "I can't pay for anything." "I'm not offering to sell you something," Andre said with a small smile. "Just a seat and a chance to dry off. I'm Andre, by the way." "Zoe," she replied, accepting the towel. "Thanks." Once seated in a corner booth with a cup of hot tea Mr. Chen had insisted on giving her, on the house, Zoe explained that she'd recently moved to town and was still finding her way around. "I was heading to the art supply store on Willow Street," she said. "I must have set my wallet down somewhere, or maybe—" Her expression darkened. "Someone took it while I was waiting at the bus stop." Andre frowned. "The stop near Palmer Avenue? That's a rough spot. There's a group of guys who hang out there sometimes. They've been known to snatch things from distracted people. You think it was stolen?" Zoe's shoulders slumped. "Maybe. But if they just grabbed and ran, they might have dropped it nearby. They usually just take the cash and ditch the rest." Andre glanced at the wall clock. His shift ended in 20 minutes, but Mr. Chen nodded from behind the counter as if reading his mind. "Go help the girl. Andre, I'll cover your tables." "You don't have to," Zoe began, but Andre was already untying his apron. "I know this neighborhood better than most. If your wallet's around here, we have a decent chance of finding it." The rain had eased to a drizzle as they retraced Zoe's steps. Andre noticed how she walked, careful, deliberate steps like someone used to watching her posture. Her clothes were simple but had a quality to them that stood out in Pine Heights. She didn't belong here, that much was obvious, but he couldn't place exactly why. "So you're new to town?" he asked as they scanned the sidewalks and bushes near the bus stop. Zoe nodded. "I've been here about 2 weeks. I'm taking classes at the community college and working part-time at the Wilson Gallery downtown." "Art student?" A small smile broke through her worried expression. "Art history? I've always been fascinated by stories behind paintings, the artists, the time periods, what they were trying to say." Andre spotted something under a bench, a small leather object half hidden by mud. "Hold up, is that it?" Zoe rushed over and let out a relieved sigh. "Yes, that's my wallet." She picked it up, quickly opening it to assess the damage. "The cash is gone, of course, but my ID and cards are still here." She looked up at Andre, genuine gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you so much. I would have never thought to look here. Like I said, the guys around here just want quick cash. They don't bother with cards they can't use." Andre stuffed his hands in his pockets, suddenly aware of how different their worlds must be. "At least you got the important stuff back." They walked back toward the cafe, Zoe clutching her muddy wallet. The way she carried herself, there was something almost formal about it, like she'd been taught to walk with a book on her head. "Where are you staying?" Andre asked. "I have a small apartment on Cedar Street. It's nothing special, but it's close enough to campus." Andre raised an eyebrow. Cedar Street wasn't the worst area, but it wasn't great either. "That's a tough neighborhood for someone not familiar with the city." Zoe shrugged. "It's what I could afford. I'm trying to make it on my own, figure things out for myself." There was something in her voice, a determination that Andre recognized. He had heard it in his mother's voice countless times. The will to push forward even when the path wasn't clear. Back at the cafe, Zoe insisted on waiting until Andre's shift properly ended. "It's the least I can do after you helped me," she said. Mr. Chen brought over 2 slices of apple pie. "On the house," he said with a wink at Andre. "Your young lady friend looks like she could use some sugar after all that excitement." "Oh, we're not." Both Zoe and Andre started at the same time, then laughed. "Thanks, Mr. Chen," Andre said, accepting the peace offering. His boss had a soft spot for anyone in need, a quality Andre deeply respected. As they ate, Andre learned that Zoe had moved to town completely on her own. No family, no friends, just a determination to start fresh. "Why here, though?" Andre asked. "Most people are trying to leave Pine Heights, not move in." Zoe pushed her pie around the plate. "I'm looking for something. Or someone, I guess. It's complicated." Andre didn't push. Everyone had their secrets. His own family had plenty. "Well, if you need a guide to the less scenic parts of town, I work here most weekends and after school on Wednesdays and Thursdays." He surprised himself with the offer. "I might take you up on that," Zoe said with a smile that transformed her whole face. For a brief moment she looked carefree, like any ordinary teenager. When it was time to leave, the rain had stopped completely, and the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds. Andre insisted on walking Zoe to her bus stop, a safer one this time. "I really appreciate your help today," Zoe said as they waited. "Most people wouldn't have bothered," Andre shrugged. "My mom would skin me alive if I didn't help someone in trouble. That's just how we do things." "Your mom sounds like a good person." "The best," Andre agreed. "She works harder than anyone I know." The bus appeared around the corner and Zoe readied herself to board. "Maybe I'll stop by the cafe again sometime." "Yeah, maybe," Andre said, not entirely convinced he'd see her again. People like Zoe, they passed through places like Pine Heights. They didn't linger, but as the bus pulled away, Zoe waved from the window and Andre found himself hoping she would return. There was something about her, a mystery he couldn't quite place. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with a text from his mother asking him to pick up milk on the way home. Reality snapped back into focus. He had responsibilities, mouths to feed, bills to help pay. Whatever Zoe's story was, it would have to remain a curiosity. Pine Heights had taught Andre early on that some paths simply didn't cross for long. What he couldn't know, as he turned toward the grocery store, was that Zoe was already planning her return to Mabel's cafe. She'd found something unexpected in Pine Heights, a genuine connection in a place where she'd come seeking only answers. For the first time in weeks, she felt less alone, and in a city full of strangers, that feeling was worth more than all the money that had been stolen from her wallet. 3 days passed before Zoe returned to Mabel's cafe. Andre spotted her the moment she walked through the door, her curly hair now pulled back in a neat ponytail. She wore a simple white blouse and jeans, carrying a worn messenger bag over her shoulder. Their eyes met and she offered a hesitant wave. "You came back," Andre said, unable to hide his surprise as he approached her table. "I promised I would," Zoe replied with a small smile. "Plus, I never properly thanked you for helping me the other day." Andre shrugged. "No big deal. Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said firmly. "Not anyone. Trust me on that." There was something in her voice, a hint of experience with people who'd turned their backs when help was needed. Andre knew that feeling all too well. Over the next few weeks, Zoe became a regular at the cafe. She'd arrive with textbooks and sketch pads, claiming the corner booth by the window where the light was best. She'd order a single cup of tea that she'd nurse for hours while studying. Mr. Chen never complained about her taking up space. Business was slow anyway, and her presence seemed to brighten the place. On a particularly quiet Thursday afternoon, Andre found himself with little to do. He approached Zoe's table, curious about the large book open before her. "Renaissance art?" he asked, noting the colorful paintings on the pages. Zoe nodded. "I have a paper due next week on the use of symbolism in religious artwork." Andre pulled up a chair at her invitation. "So that's why you're working at the Wilson Gallery?" "Because you love art?" "Partly," Zoe admitted. "I needed the money, but I also hoped—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I hoped I might find some information there." "About my family?" Andre raised an eyebrow. "Your family?" Zoe reached into her bag and pulled out a small photograph, its edges worn from handling. She slid it across the table. The photo showed a young couple standing in front of what looked like an impressive garden. The woman wore a flowing summer dress, her smile radiant as she leaned against the man beside her. "My birth parents," Zoe explained. "At least I think they are." "You're adopted?" Andre asked gently. Zoe nodded. "I always knew I was, but my adoptive parents never told me much about where I came from. When I turned 18 last month, I decided to find out for myself." "And your search led you here? To Pine Heights?" The back of the photo has an address written on it. "It's not far from here, but the building's been torn down. The gallery has an archive of local history, so I've been searching through it during my breaks." "So far, nothing." Andre studied the photo more closely. "This garden looks familiar. I think it might be at Westbrook Park on the north side of town. It's part of some fancy estate now, but it used to be open to the public years ago." Zoe's eyes widened. "You think so? Could you show me?" "It's pretty far from here. We'd need to take 2 buses. I'm free on Sunday," Zoe said, hope brightening her features. "If you are." Andre thought about his weekend chores, the help his mother needed around the house. But looking at Zoe's expectant face, he couldn't bring himself to refuse. "Sunday works. I can meet you here at 10? The smile that broke across her face made him forget his reservations. Sunday arrived with perfect blue skies and a gentle breeze. Andre arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early, surprised to find Zoe already waiting outside. She wore a simple sundress and carried a small backpack. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked. The journey across town gave Andre a chance to tell Zoe more about Pine Heights, its history, its struggles, and its hidden gems. He spoke of the community garden his mother helped start, the local musicians who performed at the park on summer evenings, the elderly neighbors who watched out for kids walking home from school. "You really love this place," Zoe observed. "It's home," Andre replied simply. "It's got its problems, but there's good here too. People look out for each other." When they finally arrived at Westbrook Park, Andre led Zoe toward the northern section where tall iron gates now separated the public park from private property. "That's Hillcrest Manor," Andre explained, pointing to a grand house barely visible through the trees. "Some rich family bought it about 15 years ago. The gardens used to be part of the public park until they purchased that section too." Zoe stared through the gates, comparing the scene with her photograph. "It's the same place," she whispered. "The pathway, that stone bench, they're in my photo." A security guard patrolling inside the gate noticed them and approached with a stern expression. "No loitering near the gates, folks." Andre was about to apologize when Zoe spoke up. "Excuse me, sir. Do you know anything about the family that lives here?" The guard's expression softened slightly at Zoe's polite tone. "The Harringtons? They've owned the place for years. Mr. Harrington is hardly ever here, business travels and such. Mrs. Harrington runs some charity foundation." "Have they always been here? Or was it owned by someone else before?" Zoe pressed. The guard scratched his chin. "Place belonged to the Montgomery family decades ago, I think. Big scandal when the daughter died, car accident or something. After that, the old man sold it off." "Why do you ask?" Zoe held up her photograph. "I'm trying to find information about these people." The guard squinted at the photo, then shook his head. "Before my time, sorry. But Mrs. Thomas might know. She's been the head housekeeper since forever." "Ancient lady now, but sharp as a tack. How could we speak with her?" Andre asked. "She comes to town every Wednesday, does her shopping at Gould's Market on 5th Street. Always there when they open at 8. Like clockwork." The guard straightened up. "That's all I can tell you. Now move along, please." As they walked back through the park, Zoe was quiet, lost in thought. Finally, she turned to Andre. "Will you come with me on Wednesday? To meet this housekeeper?" "You barely know me," Andre said carefully. "Why do you trust me with all this?" Zoe stopped walking and faced him. "Because you helped a complete stranger find a muddy wallet when there was nothing in it for you. Because you talk about your family and your neighborhood with pride instead of shame. Because—" She took a deep breath. "Because I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who only do things when there's something to gain." Andre felt a tightness in his chest. There was pain in her words, the kind that came from experience. "I'll be there," he promised. Wednesday morning found them waiting outside Gould's Market well before 8. The sky was overcast, threatening rain. Andre had told his mother he was helping a friend with a school project, which wasn't entirely a lie. That must be her. Zoe whispered, nodding toward an elderly woman approaching the store. Though her hair was white as snow and her back slightly bent with age, she walked with purpose. Her handbag clutched firmly in gnarled hands. Andre and Zoe followed her into the store, hanging back as she methodically selected items from her list. When she stopped at the bakery section deliberating between loaves of bread, Zoe approached her. "Mrs. Thomas?" she asked softly. The old woman looked up with sharp blue eyes. "Yes, do I know you, dear?" "No, ma'am. My name is Zoe. I was hoping I might ask you about the Montgomery family. You worked for them, I believe." Mrs. Thomas's expression flickered with surprise, then caution. "That was a long time ago. What's your interest?" Wordlessly, Zoe produced the photograph. The elderly woman's hands trembled slightly as she took it, her eyes widening in recognition. "Victoria," she whispered. "And Robert." She looked up sharply at Zoe, studying her face with new intensity. "Where did you get this?" "It was with my adoption papers," Zoe said. "I believe they might be my birth parents." Mrs. Thomas glanced around the store, suddenly wary. "This is not a conversation for the bread aisle, child. Do you have somewhere we can talk privately?" 30 minutes later, they sat in a quiet corner of a nearby diner. Mrs. Thomas hadn't said much during the walk there, but her eyes kept returning to Zoe's face, as though searching for something. "You have her eyes," the old woman finally said. "Victoria's eyes. I noticed it right away." Andre watched as Zoe's composure faltered for the first time since he'd met her. "Then it's true? Victoria Montgomery was my mother?" Mrs. Thomas nodded slowly. "Victoria and Robert eloped against her father's wishes. The Montgomerys were very powerful people. Old money. When Victoria got pregnant, her father was furious. Robert wasn't from their social circle, you see. Theodore Montgomery threatened to cut Victoria off completely. What happened to them?" Zoe asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Thomas's eyes clouded with old grief. "The car accident happened when you were just 3 months old. They were on their way to a lawyer's office, something about changing wills. Neither survived." She reached across the table and took Zoe's hand. "Everyone was told the baby died too. I always wondered." A tear slid down Zoe's cheek. "Who arranged my adoption?" "That would have been Richard, Victoria's brother. He handled everything after the accident. Always too eager to please his father, that one." Mrs. Thomas's expression hardened. "Theodore Montgomery is still alive, you know. In his 80s now. Richard runs the family business, waiting for the old man to die so he can inherit everything." Andre, who had been silent until now, asked, "Does Mr. Montgomery know about Zoe?" Mrs. Thomas shook her head. "I don't think so. He was heartbroken after Victoria died. Became a recluse, but..." She paused, considering. "If he knew he had a granddaughter, it would change everything." The implications hung in the air between them. Zoe looked overwhelmed, her world tilting on its axis. "Thank you for telling me," she said finally to Mrs. Thomas. "I just wanted to know where I came from, who I am." The elderly woman squeezed her hand. "Be careful, child. The Montgomery fortune is vast. If Richard discovers you exist..." She didn't finish the thought. Outside the diner, rain had begun to fall. Andre opened his umbrella, large enough for both him and Zoe to shelter under. They walked in silence for several blocks. "What will you do now?" he finally asked. Zoe looked up at him, her expression a mixture of determination and fear. "I need to think. This is bigger than I imagined." Andre nodded, understanding that her simple search for roots had become something far more complicated. "Whatever you decide, I'll help. If you want me to." In the gray afternoon light, with rain pattering on the umbrella above them, Zoe smiled. A small, grateful smile that carried the weight of newfound truth. "I do," she said. "I really do." Zoe didn't come to the cafe for 3 days after meeting Mrs. Thomas. Andre tried not to worry, keeping busy with his shifts and schoolwork, but his eyes darted to the door whenever the bell jingled. On the 4th day, just as he was losing hope, she appeared. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with shadows that spoke of sleepless nights. "Hey," Andre said, relief washing over him. "I was getting worried." "Sorry," Zoe replied, sliding into her usual booth. "I needed some time to process everything." Andre nodded, understanding. "Tea?" "Please." When he returned with her drink, Zoe was staring out the window, her expression distant. "Someone was in my apartment," she said quietly. Andre froze. "What, when?" "Yesterday, while I was at work." Nothing obvious was taken, but things were moved. My drawers had been searched. She turned to face him. I think someone's been watching me since I started asking questions. A cold feeling settled in Andre's stomach. You should go to the police. Zoe shook her head. And tell them what? That I suspect my rich uncle is having me followed because I might threaten his inheritance. They'd think I was crazy. She took a deep breath. I can't stay there anymore. It doesn't feel safe. Andre thought of his family's small apartment, already crowded with his mother, himself, and his two younger sisters. But the thought of Zoe alone and afraid was worse. My place isn't much, but you could crash on our couch for a few days, he offered, just until you figure things out. Zoe looked up, surprise and gratitude in her eyes. Are you sure? I don't want to impose on your family. My mom's big on helping people who need it. She'll understand. That evening, Andre led Zoe up 3 flights of stairs to apartment 3B. The building was old but well-maintained, with hallways that smelled of pine cleaner and cooking spices. He hesitated at the door. It's not fancy, he warned. Zoe smiled. Andre, I've been living in a studio apartment with a shower that barely works and neighbors who fight all night. I'm not judging. When they entered, the apartment was alive with activity. 10-year-old Lily was sprawled on the living room floor with homework, while 13-year-old Danny argued with someone on her phone in the corner. From the kitchen came the sound of pots clanging and the smell of something delicious cooking. Ma, Andre called out. I brought someone who needs a place to stay for a bit. Lisa Jackson emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was a striking woman with the same deep brown eyes as Andre, though lines of fatigue and worry had etched themselves around them over the years. Her expression was curious but warm as she took in the sight of Zoe. Well, hello there, she said, her voice rich and welcoming. I'm Lisa. Zoe, came the reply. I'm really sorry to impose. Andre said it would be okay for a few days while I sort out some housing issues. Lisa's gaze was perceptive, taking in more than Zoe had said. Any friend of Andre's is welcome here. We don't have much space, but the couch pulls out into a bed. Thank you, Zoe said, the tension in her shoulders visibly easing. I really appreciate it. Dinner that night was a lively affair. Lily peppered Zoe with questions about her art studies, while Danny pretended disinterest but clearly listened to every word. Lisa served a hearty stew that stretched to feed an extra mouth without anyone feeling shorted. Zoe offered to help with dishes afterward, working alongside Lisa while Andre helped his sisters with homework. So, Lisa said quietly as they stood at the sink, what kind of trouble are you really in, honey? Zoe nearly dropped the plate she was drying. What makes you think I'm in trouble? Lisa gave her a knowing look. I've been around the block a few times. Girls don't suddenly need emergency housing unless something's wrong. Is someone after you? An ex-boyfriend? Parents? Nothing like that, Zoe assured her. It's complicated. I've been looking for information about my birth family, and I think I might have stirred up some issues. Lisa studied her face for a long moment. Something flickered in her expression. Recognition, perhaps. You know, she said thoughtfully, you remind me of someone I used to work for years ago. I was a housekeeper for a wealthy family when I first moved to this city. Zoe's hand stilled on the dish towel. What family? The Montgomerys, Lisa replied. Big house on the hill, old money. I worked there until their daughter died in that terrible accident. She shook her head at the memory. Such a tragedy. Victoria was a kind soul, not like the rest of them. Zoe's breath caught. You knew Victoria Montgomery? Lisa nodded, a sad smile crossing her face. I was one of her few friends in that house. She used to sneak down to the kitchen to talk with the staff when her father wasn't around. She glanced at Zoe more carefully now. Why do you ask? With trembling hands, Zoe pulled out the photograph she kept with her always, showing it to Lisa. Was this her? The dish Lisa was holding clattered into the sink. Where did you get this? She whispered, taking the photo with wet hands. It was with my adoption papers, Zoe said quietly. I think Victoria was my mother. Lisa's eyes widened, darting between the photograph and Zoe's face. The eyes, she murmured. I should have seen it right away. You have her eyes. From the living room, Andre watched the two women huddled in intense conversation. When his mother suddenly embraced Zoe, he knew that something significant had shifted. Later, after his sisters had gone to bed, Andre sat with his mother and Zoe at the kitchen table. Lisa had made tea, her hands still unsteady as she poured. I always wondered what happened to Victoria's baby, Lisa said. We were all told the child died in the accident too, but I had my doubts. She looked at Zoe with newfound understanding. Victoria was 7 months pregnant when she left home, eloped with Robert, a landscape architect who worked on the estate grounds. Her father was furious, disowned her on the spot. Why? Andre asked. Because this Robert guy wasn't rich? Lisa nodded. Theodore Montgomery was obsessed with the family legacy. Robert Keller was talented but came from nothing. Working class background, scholarship to design school, in Theodore's eyes completely unsuitable. Mrs. Thomas, the housekeeper we met, said they died on their way to a lawyer's office, Zoe said. Something about changing wills. Victoria called me the day before, Lisa revealed. She was excited. Said Robert had landed a huge project and they were financially stable at last. She wanted to introduce her father to their daughter, to you, and try to reconcile. A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. And then the accident happened. Andre prompted gently. Lisa's expression darkened. The brakes failed on their car. At least that's what the official report said. She took a sip of her tea. There were rumors, though. Victoria's brother Richard stood to inherit everything if she remained estranged from their father. He had the most to lose if she reconciled with Theodore. You think he... Andre couldn't finish the thought. I don't know, Lisa said firmly. But within a week of the accident, Richard had me and 3 other staff members who were close to Victoria fired. Said it was budget cuts. She reached across the table and took Zoe's hand. If you really are Victoria's daughter, and I believe you are, you need to be very careful. The Montgomery fortune is worth hundreds of millions. Zoe looked pale in the kitchen's harsh light. I just wanted to know where I came from. I never thought. Money makes people do terrible things, Lisa said gently, but it also means you have resources you never knew about. Theodore Montgomery is still alive. If he knew his granddaughter survived, he might welcome me, Zoe finished, or he might reject me like he rejected my mother. There's one way to find out, Andre suggested. But we need proof first, something more than just a resemblance and an old photo. Lisa stood up and disappeared into her bedroom, returning moments later with a small wooden box. From it, she extracted a delicate silver locket. Victoria gave me this when I admired it once. Inside is a lock of her hair. She said it was a family tradition to keep such things. Lisa opened the locket to reveal a coiled strand of hair, the same honey-brown shade as Zoe's. DNA testing could prove your connection. Zoe stared at the locket, then at Lisa. Why did you keep this all these years? Lisa smiled sadly. Victoria was kind to me when few others in that house were. After she died, I couldn't bear to part with it. She pressed the locket into Zoe's hand. Now I understand why I was meant to keep it. The next morning, Andre woke early to find Zoe already up, sitting by the window with a cup of tea. Sunlight caught her profile, highlighting her features in a way that made Lisa's recognition the night before seem obvious. You okay? He asked, joining her. Not really, she admitted. Yesterday I was just a girl looking for her parents. Today I might be the heir to a fortune that my uncle would kill to protect. She turned to him, fear evident in her eyes. What am I supposed to do with that? Andre wished he had a simple answer. First we get proof. Then we figure out how to approach your grandfather safely. We? Zoe asked, a hint of hope in her voice. You think I'd leave you to face this alone? Andre smiled. Besides, this is the most exciting thing that's ever happened in Pine Heights. I'm invested now. A small laugh escaped her, the sound a welcome break in the tension. Thank you, she said, for everything. As the morning light strengthened, casting long shadows across the apartment's worn carpet, they began to plan. Neither could have guessed how quickly their carefully laid plans would unravel, or how dangerous the path ahead would become. But for that moment, in the quiet of the early morning with the sounds of the waking city beyond the window, there was a fragile sense of purpose and perhaps, if they were lucky, the first steps toward justice. 3 days after Zoe moved into the Jacksons' apartment, a sleek black car parked across the street. Andre noticed it first on his way to school. Tinted windows, expensive model, clearly out of place in their neighborhood. By evening, when the same car remained, Lisa pulled the curtains closed and kept the girls away from the windows. Someone found you, she told Zoe, her voice low and worried. The next morning, when Andre left for his early shift at the cafe, a tall man in an expensive suit was leaning against the car. Their eyes met briefly before Andre hurried past, heart pounding. When he returned home that afternoon, Zoe was sitting rigidly at the kitchen table, a cream-colored business card in her hand. "He approached me when I went out for groceries," she explained, sliding the card toward Andre. "Said his name is William Porter, attorney for Theodore Montgomery. He wants to meet with me tomorrow." Andre picked up the card. Embossed gold lettering declared Porter and Associates legal counsel to Montgomery Enterprises. "Did he say how they found you?" Lisa asked, joining them at the table. Zoe shook her head. "Just that Mr. Montgomery recently learned he might have a surviving grandchild and wishes to verify the claim." Her fingers trembled slightly. "They've been monitoring activity around my apartment since I started asking about the Montgomery family. When I disappeared, they widened their search." "This could be good news," Andre offered. "If your grandfather is looking for you, or it could be Richard using his father's lawyer to find me," Zoe countered. "The timing is suspicious. We just got the DNA kit yesterday. They're moving awfully fast." The home DNA test had been Andre's idea. Ordered online, paid for with cash, delivered to a friend's address. It would take weeks for results, but it was their most solid chance at proof. Lisa studied the business card. "William Porter has been with the Montgomery family for decades. He was there when I worked at the estate. Loyal to Theodore, not Richard." She looked up at Zoe. "But that doesn't mean we walk into this blindly." They spent the evening planning. The meeting would take place at a public restaurant downtown. Andre would accompany Zoe but sit at a separate table to watch for trouble. Lisa would keep the DNA sample secure, their insurance policy if things went wrong. The next morning, Andre and Zoe dressed in the nicest clothes they could manage. For Andre, this meant his school interview outfit, dark jeans and a button-down shirt his mother had found at a thrift store. Zoe wore a simple blue dress borrowed from Lisa, who was nearly the same size. "Remember," Lisa said as they prepared to leave, "give them nothing until you're sure of their intentions. If anything feels wrong, you walk out immediately." The restaurant was fancier than any place Andre had ever eaten. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and waiters in crisp uniforms glided between tables. As planned, Andre took a table near the entrance while Zoe met William Porter at a corner booth. From his position, Andre could see them but couldn't hear their conversation over the gentle piano music and clinking silverware. William Porter was in his 60s, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He spoke with his hands, occasionally nodding as Zoe responded. After about 15 minutes, Porter made a call on his cell phone. Andre tensed, watching carefully as the lawyer handed the phone to Zoe. The color drained from Zoe's face as she listened to whoever was on the other end. The call lasted less than 2 minutes, but when it ended, Zoe's hands were shaking. She handed the phone back to Porter and glanced toward Andre, giving a small nod, their signal that she was okay. 20 minutes later, they left the restaurant together. Porter held the door for Zoe, his manner respectful. Outside, he handed her an envelope before climbing into the black car that had been watching their apartment. As the car pulled away, Andre rushed to Zoe's side. "What happened? Who was on the phone?" "My grandfather," Zoe said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Theodore Montgomery himself." On the bus ride home, Zoe described the conversation. Theodore had been direct, his voice frail but determined. He had recently discovered, through old letters from Victoria found after firing his longtime assistant, who happened to be Richard's ally, that his daughter had been pregnant when she died. The official story of the baby dying in the crash had never sat right with him, but grief and Richard's insistence had led him to accept it. "He wants to meet me," Zoe explained, "but on his terms. He's arranged for a private DNA test to confirm I'm Victoria's daughter. The envelope has the details, a clinic appointment tomorrow morning." "Do you trust him?" Andre asked. Zoe stared out the window at the passing city. "I don't know, but he sounded lonely, desperate almost. He said he's been searching for months after finding the letters." Back at the apartment, Lisa examined the papers from the envelope. "This testing facility is legitimate," she confirmed after making a few calls. "They handle paternity suits for wealthy clients, very discreet, very accurate." "So I should go?" Zoe asked. "We should go," Andre corrected. "I'm not letting you face this alone." The next morning, they arrived at a nondescript medical building downtown. The waiting room was empty except for them. A private appointment, the receptionist explained. The procedure was simple. A cheek swab collected by a nurse who treated Zoe with professional courtesy. They were told results would be available within 48 hours. As they left the clinic, Andre felt a prickle of unease. A man in sunglasses stood across the street watching them too intently. When Andre met his gaze, the man turned and walked away. "We should get back," Andre said, taking Zoe's elbow and guiding her toward the bus stop. "I don't like how that guy was looking at us." They had barely gone a block when a different man stepped out from an alley directly into their path. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a faint scar across his jawline, he smiled without warmth. "Miss Harrington," he said, using Zoe's adoptive surname. "Or should I call you Miss Montgomery now? My employer would like a word." Andre stepped in front of Zoe. "Your employer can call her lawyer." The man's smile didn't waver. "This isn't a request, kid. Step aside." "No." Andre's heart hammered in his chest, but he stood his ground. The man sighed as if disappointed, then moved with surprising speed. His hand shot out, shoving Andre with enough force to send him stumbling backward. As Andre regained his balance, he saw the man reaching for Zoe's arm. Without thinking, Andre charged forward, driving his shoulder into the man's side. They both tumbled to the sidewalk. Andre had never been in a real fight before, just the roughhousing of boys in the neighborhood. But fear for Zoe gave him a desperate strength. "Run!" He shouted to Zoe, struggling to keep the larger man pinned down. A car horn blared from the street. Andre looked up to see William Porter's black car pulled alongside them, the lawyer himself leaning out the window. "Get in," Porter shouted. "Both of you!" The man beneath Andre took advantage of his distraction, throwing him off and scrambling to his feet. But before he could reach Zoe, a police siren wailed in the distance. The sound made the man hesitate just long enough for Andre to grab Zoe's hand and pull her toward Porter's car. They tumbled into the back seat, and the car pulled away before they'd even closed the door properly. "Are you both all right?" Porter asked, looking at them in the rearview mirror. "Who was that?" Zoe demanded, breathless. "One of Richard's men, I suspect," Porter replied grimly. "He's been unusually agitated since your grandfather started asking questions about Victoria's child. Now I understand why." The lawyer glanced at Andre. "That was brave, young man. Foolish but brave." Andre's hands were still shaking from adrenaline. "Where are you taking us?" "Somewhere safe for now. Mr. Montgomery has a downtown apartment that Richard doesn't know about. You'll stay there until the DNA results come back. I need to call my mom," Andre insisted. "She'll be worried." Porter nodded. "Of course, but use my phone, not yours. Cell phones can be traced." The downtown apartment turned out to be a luxurious penthouse with sweeping views of the city. It felt unreal to Andre. The plush carpet beneath his feet, the artwork on the walls that probably cost more than his family's entire apartment building. Zoe seemed equally overwhelmed, perching tentatively on the edge of a leather sofa, as if afraid to fully sit on it. After calling Lisa to explain what had happened, leaving out the part about the physical confrontation, Andre joined Zoe by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below them, the city stretched out, cars and people moving like toys. "This is the world you come from," Andre said quietly. "Pretty different from Pine Heights." Zoe shook her head. "This isn't my world. I didn't grow up like this. But it could be your future," Andre pointed out. "If the DNA test proves you're a Montgomery, then what?" Zoe turned to face him. "I move into some mansion? Pretend I belong there?" She gestured around the opulent apartment. "None of this feels real to me." "It's safer than what we just experienced on the street," Andre countered. Zoe fell silent, her expression troubled. Finally, she said, "I'm afraid, Andre. Not just of Richard and his men, but of all this. What if the DNA test is positive? What if Theodore welcomes me as his heir? Do I just step into a new life and leave everything else behind?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to face. Porter returned from making calls in the other room. "The police are looking for the man who accosted you, but I doubt they'll find him. People like that tend to disappear when convenient." He sat across from them, his expression serious. "Mr. Montgomery would like to meet you tomorrow regardless of the test results. He's not well, I'm afraid. His health has been declining for some time." "Will Richard be there?" Zoe asked. Porter shook his head. "Mr. Montgomery has arranged for his son to be out of town on business. But you should be prepared. Richard has resources, and he won't give up easily if he believes you threaten his position. After Porter left, promising to return in the morning, Andre and Zoe found themselves alone in the silent luxury of the penthouse. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple visible through the massive windows. "Do you think your mom is okay?" Zoe asked suddenly. What if Richard's men go looking for her? The thought sent a chill through Andre. He hadn't considered that his family might be in danger too. "I should go home," he said, standing up. Zoe caught his hand. "No, Porter said it's not safe." Her eyes were wide with worry. "I never meant to drag you into this. Your family—" "Hey," Andre said gently, sitting back down beside her. "We're in this together, remember? My mom can handle herself. She's tougher than she looks." As night fell over the city, they sat side by side on the unfamiliar sofa, both lost in thought. Tomorrow would bring answers about Zoe's identity, her future, and perhaps the truth behind her parents' deaths. But for tonight, in this strange place so far removed from their normal lives, all they had was each other and the uncertain promise of dawn. The Montgomery estate stood atop the highest hill in the city, its stone walls and iron gates a barrier between the wealthy family within and the world below. As William Porter's car wound up the tree-lined driveway, Andre pressed his face to the window, taking in gardens that stretched farther than he could see. Beside him, Zoe sat perfectly still, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Breathe," Andre whispered, reaching for her hand. "It's going to be okay." Zoe's fingers were cold as they wrapped around his. "What if he doesn't like me? What if I'm not what he expects? Then that's his loss," Andre replied firmly. The DNA results had come back that morning, confirming what they already believed. Zoe was, without question, the biological granddaughter of Theodore Montgomery. Upon receiving the news, the elderly patriarch had immediately requested her presence at the estate. Andre had insisted on accompanying her despite Porter's objections. "He comes with me or I don't go," Zoe had stated, her voice stronger than it had been in days. Porter had reluctantly agreed. Now, as the car stopped before massive double doors, Andre felt woefully out of place in his borrowed clothes. Porter had arranged for a suit for him, nothing custom but still more expensive than anything he'd ever worn. Zoe wore a simple blue dress that somehow made her look both elegant and approachable. "Mr. Montgomery is waiting in the east sitting room," Porter informed them as a uniformed staff member opened the car door. "He's asked to see Zoe alone first." Andre started to protest, but Zoe squeezed his hand. "It's all right. I can do this part on my own." Her eyes met his. "Wait for me?" "Always," he promised. The grandeur of the Montgomery mansion made Andre feel as if he'd stepped into another world. High ceilings, marble floors, artwork that belonged in museums rather than private homes. It was overwhelming. A stern-faced housekeeper led him to a smaller waiting room, while Zoe followed Porter deeper into the house. Alone in the luxurious room, Andre paced nervously. 20 minutes passed, then 30. He was about to demand Porter's return when the door opened, revealing a middle-aged woman in expensive clothing. "You must be Andre," she said, her voice clipped and precise. "I'm Eleanor Montgomery, Richard's wife." Andre straightened, instantly on guard. "Where's Zoe?" "Still with Theodore," Eleanor replied, moving into the room with practiced grace. "I thought we might have a chat while they get acquainted." Something in her tone set off warning bells. "Does your husband know you're here?" "I thought he was out of town." A thin smile crossed Eleanor's face. "Richard returns this evening. He'll be quite surprised by all the developments." She studied Andre with calculating eyes. "You care for her, don't you? This girl who appeared from nowhere?" "She didn't appear from nowhere," Andre countered. "She's Victoria's daughter." "So the test says?" Eleanor sat on a velvet chair, gesturing for Andre to do the same. When he remained standing, she sighed. "Let's be practical. Theodore is dying. 3 months at most, according to his doctors. He's an old man, prone to sentiment and regret. This girl arrives claiming to be his long-lost granddaughter, and suddenly he's rewriting his will? Is that what this is about, money?" "It's about legacy," Eleanor corrected. "The Montgomery name, the business Richard has spent his life preparing to lead." She opened her handbag, removing a checkbook. "How much would it take for you and your friend to disappear? 500,000? $1 million? Andre stared at her, stunned. "You're trying to bribe us?" "I'm offering an opportunity," Eleanor countered smoothly. "Zoe could attend any university in the world. You could move your family out of that dreadful neighborhood. Everyone wins. Except Victoria, who never got justice, Andre replied coldly. And Theodore, who deserves to know his granddaughter. Eleanor's pleasant expression hardened. Don't be foolish, boy. You're in over your head. The door opened again and Porter appeared. Mrs. Montgomery, he said, surprise evident in his voice. I wasn't aware you were on the property. Just paying a friendly visit, Eleanor replied, snapping her checkbook closed. To Andre, she added, think about my offer. It won't remain open indefinitely. With that, she swept from the room, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume. Porter frowned. What did she want? To buy us off, Andre said bluntly. Is Zoe okay? More than okay, Porter replied, a rare smile crossing his face. Come see for yourself. The east sitting room was smaller than Andre had imagined, its walls lined with bookshelves and family photographs. Sunshine streamed through tall windows, illuminating Zoe as she sat beside a frail elderly man on an antique sofa. They were looking at a photo album, their heads bent together in a way that emphasized their similar profiles. Theodore Montgomery looked up as they entered. Despite his obvious physical weakness, his blue eyes were sharp and alert. So this is the young man who helped my granddaughter, he said, his voice surprisingly strong. Yes, sir, Andre replied, uncertain of the proper etiquette. Theodore gestured to a nearby chair. Sit, please. Zoe has told me about your courage yesterday. I owe you a debt of gratitude. Andre sat awkwardly, aware of the vast gulf between his world and this one. I just did what anyone would do. No, Theodore said firmly. Not anyone. Very few, in fact. He turned to Porter. William, would you give us some privacy? And ensure we're not disturbed again. When the lawyer had gone, Theodore closed the photo album. Zoe tells me you've been essential to her search. That your mother once worked in this house and recognized Victoria in her. Andre nodded. My mom was a housekeeper here about 20 years ago. She and Victoria were friends. Lisa Jackson, Theodore said, nodding. I remember her, though I paid little attention to the staff in those days. Regret tinged his voice. One of many mistakes I made. Zoe touched her grandfather's hand. You didn't know? I didn't want to know, he corrected gently. I was too proud, too concerned with appearances. I lost my daughter because of it. His gaze shifted to Andre, and nearly lost my granddaughter as well. For the next hour they talked. Theodore asked about Zoe's life, her dreams, her education. He listened intently to stories of her childhood, occasionally closing his eyes as if picturing the scenes she described. When she mentioned her interest in art history, he brightened. Victoria was an artist, he said. Talented, though I never encouraged it. Thought it impractical. He gestured to a painting above the fireplace, a landscape rendered in vivid colors. She painted that when she was 16. It was the only piece of hers I kept after she left. As the afternoon progressed, Theodore grew visibly tired, though he waved away suggestions that they continue another day. Time is the one commodity I cannot purchase more of, he said pragmatically. We must address practical matters now. He pressed a button beside his chair and Porter returned promptly. William, it's time to discuss the amendments to my will, Theodore announced. And the audit of Richard's financial dealings. Porter looked uncomfortable. Sir, perhaps this conversation should be private. No more secrets in this family, Theodore insisted. Zoe should know what she's walking into. He turned to his granddaughter. Richard has been embezzling from the company for years. I suspected but had no proof until recently. The evidence is damning. He'll face criminal charges when it comes to light. Zoe paled. Is that why he wanted to find me first? To prevent this from happening? You represented an additional threat, Theodore confirmed. With you confirmed as Victoria's child, his position becomes even more precarious. The old man sighed heavily. I bear much of the blame. I was too harsh with Victoria, too lenient with Richard. I failed them both as a father. And now? Andre asked quietly. What happens to Zoe? Theodore straightened in his chair, summoning his remaining strength. That depends on what she wants. She is my heir, that is non-negotiable. But how she chooses to claim that inheritance is her decision. The look Zoe and Andre exchanged was filled with uncertainty. The weight of Theodore's statement hung in the air between them. That night, back at the penthouse apartment, Zoe stood at the windows watching city lights flicker in the darkness. Andre joined her after speaking with his mother on the phone, assuring her they were safe. Theodore's security team is watching your family's apartment, he told Zoe. just in case Richard tries anything. Zoe nodded absently, her mind clearly elsewhere. "Hey," Andre said gently. "What's going on in that head of yours?" "I don't belong in that world," she finally said. "All that wealth, those rules and expectations. It's not me." She turned to face him. "But I can't walk away either. He's my grandfather and he's dying." Andre understood her dilemma. "So don't choose one world over the other. Make your own path." 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Andre stood outside a renovated brick building in Pine Heights. The sign above the door read, "Montgomery Community Arts Center," and beneath it, in smaller letters, "Dedicated to Victoria and Robert." Inside, local children filled art classrooms while adults attended business development workshops in converted office spaces. What had once been an abandoned warehouse was now the heart of a neighborhood transformation. In the main gallery, Zoe hung a painting, one of Victoria's that Theodore had kept in storage for decades. She spotted Andre and smiled, crossing the room to join him. "What do you think?" she asked, gesturing to the space around them. "I think your mom would be proud," Andre replied honestly, "and your grandfather too." Theodore Montgomery had passed away 2 months earlier, just long enough to see the beginnings of Zoe's vision for her inheritance. Rather than simply moving into his world, she had brought resources back to communities that needed them. Richard had been removed from the family business, facing legal consequences for his financial crimes. The full truth about Victoria and Robert's accident remained elusive, but investigations continued. The Foundation Board approved the scholarship program, Zoe told Andre, excitement brightening her features. 20 full-ride college scholarships for kids from Pine Heights starting next fall. Andre grinned. "Does this mean I need to start calling you Ms. Montgomery now that you're my boss?" Zoe laughed, the sound echoing in the high-ceilinged gallery. "You're not an employee, you're the community outreach director." There's a difference. Their relationship had evolved over the months since their lives had been upended. Andre still lived with his family, though in a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. Lisa had quit her second job to run the center's food security program. His sisters were thriving in their new schools. And Zoe, she moved between worlds now, splitting her time between the Montgomery estate, which she was slowly modernizing, and a modest apartment near the community center. The lawyer called again about the main house, Zoe said as they walked through the gallery. "He thinks I should sell it, says it's too big for one person." "And what do you think?" Andre asked. Zoe considered for a moment. "I think it's part of my history, good and bad. I'm not ready to let it go." She took his hand, her fingers warm against his. "Besides, we might need the space someday." Andre felt his heart skip. "Someday?" "For future programs," she clarified with a teasing smile. "What did you think I meant?" As they continued their tour of the center, greeting community members and discussing future plans, Andre reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought them here. A lost wallet, a photograph, a search for identity, small things that had changed everything. Outside the center's windows, Pine Heights stretched in all directions, still struggling in many ways but with new hope taking root. The boundaries between Zoe's two worlds were blurring, creating something neither of them could have imagined 6 months ago. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Real life rarely provided those. There would be challenges ahead, prejudices to overcome, wounds from the past that needed healing. But as the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the gallery windows, highlighting Zoe's profile as she spoke animatedly with a group of young artists, Andre knew with certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. Not at the end of a story, but at the beginning of one they would write together,